Hello there and welcome to The Last Plague Blight, and today we're going to give you a guide on disinfecting and preserving our food. And the first part of that is which foods do you want to preserve and what are the best. Well, the cooked sausages, for example, and the cooked rabbit meat, they are nice and all. Like the rabbit meat is going to have more meat than the other meats, and then processing those other meats into sausages is going to end up being about the same food value for all the work that you put in, and it's also going to have the same blight value as the other cooked meat. So, but when you will go over there and you make it into jerky and you smoke it, and that blight value is going to go down by a huge number versus how much food you lose at the end of the day. So when you process your meat into jerky, which you can't do with rabbit meat, by the way, so don't bother trying, but when you process the other meats into jerky, you are going to smoke it, and that blight value is going to go down by such a huge number. You lose a small amount of food, but the amount of blight is way more important at the end of the day for that. And then you can go there and disinfect it also. So you can disinfect all these at the end of the day. The other foods you can go there and preserve are the berries, and they will last quite a good while if you preserve them right away, and have them at full condition when you preserve them. I just tested them out. And then the other foods are going to be the smoked meat, and that is the bass and the trout. Well, the trout is going to be very good. At 100%, it's 10 meat. The blight value is pretty low for it, and then it gets a lot lower. Once you smoke it, it gets a lot lower, and then once you disinfect it, it's a lot lower. Now, the bass meat, that is a bad meat. The meat value is a lot less. Like the meat value of a trout is going to be 10, and you get 2 pieces per fish. So you're going to get like 20 meat per fish off there, but you're only going to get like 7 out of the bass. And that's also going to get a very high blight value for some reason. So I don't think that's done properly. At least I think it's a mistake in the game right now, because this one here is 0.3 and this one here is plus 3. So yeah, that's a big difference. That's 10 times more blight after it's smoked, and then you get less meat at the end of the day. So just when you go to your fish traps, kill the bass and toss them, and then then you can go there and smoke up the trout, because that's going to be a good, valid meat for you to have. And then once it's smoked, it's already preserved, and then after it's preserved, all you gotta do is disinfect it, and then you can stick it in some vinegar, and that's gonna you'll be able to store your food for a lot longer. So that's the next part right there. Storing your food, you're going to want to store it in vinegar, and that's going to be the best way to go. You don't need the salt in there. The salt in here, this is how much salt you're going to need to get that maximum preserve value at 100% for the fastest time, and that's going to be close to like 8 hours for your stuff. So you can just sit there and you cook your rabbit meat, and then you shove it in a jar with with your 4 stacks of salt after it's dissolved, because it just takes over 100 salt dissolved in there before that stuff stabilizes, and then you can start preserving your food. And that's what you're going to do with the cooked food. But the smoked food, we don't even have to bother with that, so you don't even need too many jars that's going to have this ready to go for you. So you don't have to worry about that. So because the smoked meat is going to be better. So you just need a couple of these if you actually want some rabbits, or you want to do some blueberries for yourself and preserve them for later for some reason, because they're not the best food value, but you can disinfect them and preserve them, so they could be useful later on, and maybe for some other foods later on would be useful too once they add them in there. So that is the main thing there. So make sure you're going out there and making a lot of vinegar for yourself, and that is just the blueberries. You crush them in your jar and you stick a lid on the jar, and they'll ferment and turn into vinegar for you. So you're going to need a lot of blueberries to do that, to make a whole bunch of the fluid there, because it's also the main ingredient in the recipe for disinfecting. And that's what we're going to go on to the next part, the more complicated part, if you want it to be complicated or not, depending on how much time you want to spend on gathering all the resources. But there's 3 different recipes here for the disinfectant. They give you the basic one right away as soon as you get that slime oil. So it's vinegar and slime oil, and of course you got to have a jar and you mix it together, blah blah blah, and it's going to give you that basic disinfectant, and it's just 100 milliliters. And you're going to be sticking the stuff into the jars with the lids on it, because that's the only way you can actually do it at the moment. So you need a ton of clear jars for this. But yeah, this disinfectant is 20%. That's not too much to write home about, because 20% is basically nothing. The next recipe you're going to get eventually is going to be with this crushed blue vertol that you're going to get from the copper, and that's a pretty labor-intensive one to get, because you only get 10 grams of this stuff, so that's 10 of those blue crystals. And if you want 200 of this, you're looking at another, you're looking at 20. So if you want to make a whole bunch of this stuff, you're looking at a whole bunch of those crystals. That's going to add up to a lot of work getting that, and then that's mixed with the slime oil too. And then the last one is going to be the silver, so that's going to be your end goal. full, and this disinfectant is going to be 80%. That's the one you want to go for. But you're going, it's going to take time. You have to go there and farm the resources, deliver the resources. In the meantime, you're going to probably want to be using these recipes and understand how they work in case you mix and match them. And you might have too much because you don't want to waste it all, right? Because slime oil can be a pain in the ass. You don't want to waste it, and you don't want to waste all these resources here, and then you don't want to waste your silver because you're going to need that for the improved mushroom soup recipe. Will use the silver, and of course the stuff later on once the game is done, it's going to probably be using that silver to help clear out the towns because you might need a lot of it, and they have a very limited supply of that silver at the moment. So you probably don't want to waste it making a full jar of like 500 milliliters of this, and a full jar at 500 milliliters is probably going to take like 5 hours to disinfect something, and it takes at max at the minimum it's going to take 8 hours to for the salt mixture to do stuff also. So we don't need all that we don't need to disinfect it super fast is what I'm getting at. And you might want to mix and mash these things later on. And how they work is that they all stack together for the part of their percentage that they do. So if these things are all three of these fluids are stacked together, they're all going to work at 100% effectiveness until they hit that 20% mark. So as soon as you hit 20%, this here basic disinfectant will stop working, and the time value will stop working, and then the time will jump up there. That's why I didn't notice it the first time. When you mix them together, you get the lower time. The time doesn't stack together; only stacks together as long as it's less than 20%. So as soon as you hit that 20% mark, this one here stops working, and then it's just the other ones that are working. And then once you hit that 50% mark, that improved disinfectant stops working, and the only disinfectant that is working is going to be the strong one. So when you're mixing and matching, be aware of that mechanic, how that works, because the time might increase by a whole lot depending on how much you put in there. Like if you only put in like 100 milliliters of this stuff right here, and then the rest of it is like half and half of this stuff right here, well, you're looking at that last 30% is going to take you quite a long time because it's just 100 milliliters working for it. Well, you had a whole bunch extra. You had 200 milliliters working for this one here, and 400 or 500 working for this one. Well, 500, then 300, and then 100. So yeah, they've all been working a lot faster. So you're probably going to want to reverse that and make sure your last batch is going to have at least 200 milliliters of the strong disinfectant, because the time at 200 milliliters, you're looking at a decent amount of time to actually do that. And decent meaning low, like 13 hours or so. I think that's roughly it. Maybe 16 hours, maybe at most, if it's just 200 of this. I think that was my test. I did 200 of this and 300 vinegar basically, and I think it was like 16 hours. I'm not sure. You could test it out yourself if you want to experiment and save it later on to get the best value on it. But the basic progression of this stuff here is not too difficult if you just go with the simple basic plan. And that would be what I would do the next time I play, is I would go with the basic disinfectant right away. I would make a jar of 400 milliliters of this basic disinfectant, and then stick in another 100 milliliters of vinegar to top it off so the jar is full. And then I know I have 400 milliliters of this basic disinfectant, which will be super fast to get that 20%. You're looking at like an hour or two, and then that 20% is done. But then after that, as soon as you get this recipe here, I would take my jar here of the basic disinfectant and I would cut that in half. So I would take half of it and I would pour it into a new jar. So it's like 250 and 250. Well, probably going to be less, like 240 for the evaporation. But that doesn't matter. Just split it in half and then add another 200 milliliters of this new improved disinfectant to both of them. So now both of them are going to have they're going to be topped off with this disinfectant here of 200 of that, and then it's going to have 200 of this, and both of them are going to be topped off with vinegar. And then you top those two things off with vinegar also, because it's if it's at best you're going to have like 250, then you add 200, that's 450, and then you're going to top it off with another 50 milliliters of vinegar for yourself. So it's going to have 200 of this stuff and 200 of this one in here and there, and that's going to be a nice one. And so the first half of your disinfecting up to 20% is going to go nice and fast, and then the last half of that 30% is going to that last half, or that 30% to make it 50%, is going to go a little bit slower, but it's still very doable for the time wise. You're looking at maybe 8 hours then, right? Because if this one here took 5 hours to do, in total this would probably be 8 hours once you hit the threshold. It's going to say 5 hours, but it's going to jump up, to slow down the time, and the time is going to change after you pass that 20%. And then you do that process again, just to do the same process once again. Once you get that strong disinfectant, you take your two jars of the mixed improved disinfectant, and you cut those guys in half. So now you have 4 jars with 250 each of these mixed fluids, and then you add 200 of the strong fluid in there, and then you can top it off with more strong fluid if you want for the top off, or vinegar, depending on how fast you want that last 30% to go. So I would probably, since the silver is not too bad to get, but you want faster, I would probably top mine off at this point with the strong disinfectant, just because I've been topping it off with vinegar for the last couple times, and that's how I would go with that. And if I was really short on a supply and had a really bad silver stashes that I went out there and farmed, then I would do with the vinegar, because the time difference won't be that too big of a deal at the end of the day. But that's how you can mix, min-max your time, both your slime oil and your disinfectants, and make use of the old recipes at the same time as you expand your operations into getting and storing more food and preserving more food. And so that's how you get the disinfecting part right there. And of course, the preserving part, if you're going to do the rabbit meat and stuff like that, is just make sure you have that, the jars in there, and or the berries. Or make sure you have that. And then once that's all done, move them over into jars of vinegar. Just pure jars of vinegar. That's all you need. And that's how you can use to store your food. So what I would do here is I would start making my vinegar jars over here, probably, right? So if I wanted to fix my operation, I would put jars over here of just pure vinegar, and then once it's all preserved and done, I would just stick everything over there. So this can be all my disinfecting area, which is a little bit too big right now. I guess I could probably shorten it down, right? I only need like 6 jugs at maximum probably to disinfect stuff, so I could just make some more room and preserve stuff properly. So yeah. It's a little bit laggy now for the stuff, but yeah, and then add some more fires for your smoked meat. So yeah, this stuff is done right now, so I can just transfer it all. So that was like a deer right there. I can find like an empty container, kind of. Where's an empty one? Yeah, this is not empty, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to preserve this anyways. I can take all this stuff out and transfer it all in my sloppy recipe. So this is 10 hours. So yeah, so that's not too bad to top this off. To get that all disinfected. It's already preserved and it's already in vinegar, so it's going to last. The condition's not going to go down very fast, and it's going to go down by 80% on that 0.5. So yeah, look at that 0.2, or maybe even 0.1 if you're lucky for that. And it's don't do that, you jackass. Stupid jug. But anyways, that is what we're going to do for the recipe. So yeah, hopefully you understood that and you could follow that simple plan easily enough as you progress. And yeah, that was basically simple. At least it's simple once you learn how to do it, obviously. As make the 400 milliliters of this, split it in half, add 200 of this to each of them, and then split that in half. And now you have 4 jars, and then you add 200 milliliters to each of those jars of this one here, topping it off with vinegar along the way, and then you should be good to go having 4 jars of really strong disinfectant, and then preserving your food is simple enough. And of course, just basically go with the jerky. It's the best course at the end of the day if you want to preserve your blight value. And being by the river and having that cooked trout is also a good thing, because that's a lot lower than, it's a lot easier to get that down in the blight value versus the rabbit meat, because you can't do nothing with the rabbit meat. Even this one here converted at 80%. It's 1.3 for 31 food, and this one I eat 3 of these at 0.2. Well, it would be 0.1 basically. So once it's done, it would be 0.1. Basically. So yeah, 0.1, that's just a 0.3 versus 1.3. So it's definitely worthwhile going with the smoked trout versus the rabbit meat for yourself, and it's a little bit easier to process, but it does take a long time to do. So you're looking at 2.5 hours or so to smoke it, I think. So you have to be on top of that so you can actually stick it in there without losing much condition very, very fast. But your fish get trapped really quickly, especially on the rivers. But they don't stack up nicely as the other ones do. But yeah, that's going to be a nice, easy supply of food for you, and that should keep you fed right there for yourself. Yeah, then go out hunting deer once you are ready and able to disinfect their higher contamination level. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.